So Sharmila Ji, welcome to Gata Rahe Mera Dil.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you. You know, I've had so many musicians and people related to the field of music, but this is the first time there's an actress on the show and somebody who I've really admired from my childhood days, and it's a pleasure hosting you.
Well, it's a privilege and I feel quite flattered. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Sharmila Ji, first of all, what brings you to the US?
Well, I'm here to help CRY, to support CRY. CRY is an organization which works in the field of improving the condition of children in India. And CRY means children's rights and you, basically. Mm-hmm. So, and they're doing really wonderful work. They're trying to create an enabling environment for children.
Right.
And I don't know if you know, there are a total of 440 million children. Mm-hmm. And under the age of 18, that is, in India. And the bad news is that out of this, more than 40% of children under 3 years of age are malnourished. Mm-hmm. And then many have to walk miles and miles to the school. You know, they don't get to school. Mm-hmm. They don't get quality education. And only 3 out of 5 children receive full immunization. Although all these facilities are there, and all the laws are in place, but they are not implemented, and sometimes, you know, the promises are not kept. So I think CRY is doing a wonderful work, and I'm really very impressed and very supportive of their work, because every rupee that they earn or send here in America, it really goes goes to the right place.
It makes a big difference.
Yes, it makes a big difference. And here I must acknowledge CRY America, because they have a group of people, a supportive group here. Mm-hmm. And we do need advocates for children. We need people, privileged people, to speak up for children. So they have a wonderful set of people. I met some yesterday and I was very impressed with their commitment. It's not really how much money you give, but if you give your time, your imagination, your thoughts and your skill, that also goes a long way to help a child in need.
And there are so many creative people here, this being such a hub of economic activity, and with the Bay Area population being as large as it is of Indians, the opportunity is huge. And I was at the event yesterday, and I think it was wonderful to see such a lot of money being raised, which can really make a difference.
Absolutely. I mean, such a low-keyed fashion, in a very unfussy fashion, if I may use that expression. Mm-hmm. Nobody said very much. There was no showing off or anything. It was just a simple lunch. But it was, you could sense it was so sincere. That is what I think Shefali is a very good leader.
Mm-hmm. I know that you've done other work related to children, and you've been a UNICEF ambassador, a Goodwill ambassador as well. Was that work also related to making an impact to the lives of children?
I've always been, somehow children make a lot of difference in my life. I feel, very much at peace and, working with them. I really like children. Mm-hmm. So even before I became a Goodwill ambassador for UNICEF, I've been involved with their work in their immunization, particularly polio. Mm-hmm. I used to take a photograph of my grandchild, because the fear was that, somehow the vaccine would harm the child. Right. And I would take a photograph of my grandson and say, would I really do this to him?
Exactly.
So, like a interactive session with, one-to-one with groups. Mm-hmm. So, I did give a lot of time and did travel all over India before I became. Mm-hmm. And I have worked in, like I said, in the polio campaign and also with HIV and AIDS. When you go back 10, 15 years, it was a very big thing.
Correct.
Now things are, but there are new infections still being,
but the education
recorded.
is there now. People know a lot more about it.
People know much more about it.
Right.
But the new infections are worrying. And sometimes the medicine is not also available. Mm-hmm. Anyway, those are the challenges, and scaling up. We need to scale up. So, but in the process of working with this HIV, the orphans of HIV and AIDS, I mean, they were really, really sad. And then when we went to Uganda, UNICEF took me to Uganda, and we went to places like Bigasa, etc., and child-headed families, 12-year-olds looking after 5 siblings.
Wow.
And in one case, there were grandparents looking after 20 grandchildren, and all the children were dead.
Oh,
so, it had touched almost every family in Uganda and, thereabouts, that area. So there was huge awareness and huge support group. It was so, on one hand, you felt upset about that this was happening, but on the other hand, you felt so heartened because you saw people, being proactive and doing something about it, and not, there was no stigma. People were talking openly about it.
Right.
So we learn from each other and go forward. So yes, UNICEF has been a great learning curve and has taught me a lot of things.
So talking about other things, if you don't mind, I'd love to jump back and, take a peek at your film career. Of course, we've all followed you and, we've seen your films. My question is, when you first came into Hindi films, you came from a Bengali background and you've done a few Bengali films with Satyajit Ray. What was that transition like to do something like a Kashmir Ki Kali right after, coming from Bengal?
Well, when you're working in a regional cinema, it is sort of a logical step to go towards the national platform, so to speak. It gives you more viewership, more recognition. So yeah, that was, and Shami Kapoor at that time was working with a lot of young new actresses, and those days were those lovely music.
Yeah.
And Kashmir Ki Kali had this O.P. Nair's music.
Beautiful.
And Shami Ji, of course, used to, him working in these films, it was always a hit. So, yeah, those songs are even now so well remembered.
Yes.
And it was a pleasure, really. So it was, my Hindi, of course, was very bad. And I tried to, and then dancing, and then lip sync. That was quite a challenge. But I really enjoyed working in Kashmir Ki Kali. And when you look back, it seems so innocent. And Eastman color had just come.
Right, exactly.
And I don't know, that was that transitional, from black and white to proper color that we see now was not quite flattering, somehow when you look back. But somehow people still like it.
Oh, it was beautiful. It's one of my favorite films because it was shot, and I mentioned this to you yesterday, it was shot in Kashmir, which is where I grew up, and I see Nehru Park and Pari Mahal, and these are places that were in our backyard, literally. And
it was really lovely. We went up to Sonmarg and Pahalgam, and lovely, lovely place. We spent about a month there in this beautiful palace hotel,
Oberoi Hotel, yes.
And lived for a while in a shikara also.
Really?
For a week or so, just
on a houseboat,
in a houseboat.
Yes.
Sorry, not shikara. I meant houseboat.
Shikara is where you were.
Shikara is a small thing.
Yeah,
I know. No, I meant houseboat.
Yes, of course.
And it was really lovely. And I don't know. I hope that kind of time comes back again in Kashmir. We did, that dancing sequence where Shami Ji is wearing a Pathan
suit, yes.
So that was in Shopia. Yeah. So many little places, Verinag, and, so we traveled all over.
Did you have a chance to go back there besides
Yes,
Kashmir
of course.
Ki Kali?
After Kashmir Ki Kali, for many years, we used to go back at least twice a year to shoot there.
Right.
During April, May, and then again October.
Right.
That was a regular thing.
Okay.
And shooting abroad hadn't become so popular then. So Kashmir was the favorite spot.
Of
it's
course.
only when things became a little difficult in Kashmir we stopped going there. And I remember, when April we visited Kashmir, I would bring back flowers from there because it was just beautiful.
Yeah, it's a huge contrast to when you go to Kashmir from the rest. Anywhere in India, it's hot, and then you suddenly get to this beautiful
and then you
paradise.
see these valley of flowers and saffron, and it's just lovely.
Yeah. And of course, talking about shooting abroad, your another big hit with Sharmila Ji was An Evening in Paris.
That's right, yes.
That was another big hit with great songs. I was listening to Raat Ke Humsafar and, of course, An Evening in Paris.
All the songs. It was, and again, I had a double role.
Yes.
So a lot of it, of course, was shot indoor, but a lot of it was shot in Paris and in Interlaken.
Right.
And in Canada, the Niagara Falls and all that.
Yes, of course.
So it was, and Pran, wearing a blonde wig.
Yes.
And, it was quite different, but it's still fun. I saw it the other day on the big screen. There was a charity, fundraiser, and seeing it on a small screen is different, but seeing it on the big screen was such fun. And Sharmila Ji was still with us.
He was here.
And he was on a wheelchair. I was sitting at the back and he said, no, you can't sit there. You have to come, because his wheelchair couldn't go back.
Oh.
So I had to sit right in front and look up because, the big screen.
Yeah.
And we really enjoyed it. It still has some kind of energy.
There was a magic to those films, especially, I mean, despite
the, the obvious errors and time has moved on.
Of course.
The datedness, etc. But there is a kind of energy,
of course,
which still is nice. It's entertaining.
Yeah. So, you did films with Sharmila Ji, and of course, your big hits came with none other than Rajesh Khanna. Tell me a little bit about the chemistry. I mean, what made those films, Aradhna and Amar Prem and Daag and Safar, so special?
I don't think you can explain that sort of thing, There are no words. If one knew the formula, then, everybody would try for it. I think it's something, it catches people's imagination. That's the best way I can put it. And, of course, we as actors try to be as sincere or, as whatever the script demands. But, when there is a match of a sort,
right,
and the audience sees or senses a kind of, realness. I mean, they're convinced that this pair on the screen.
It's not a role that you're playing.
Yeah, something like that.
Right.
And that kind of makes them makes the connection, and then they like you, and then liking grows on liking, so to speak. And I think that's the closest I can come to explain.
Okay.
Other than that, I don't think. And and that was the time of, maybe the audience was also slightly naive, and, they had not seen that kind of movies. This was pre-90s. The 90s, when the economy opened up, the audience was exposed to a lot of films. And then they started changing a little bit. Right then, they were still very loyal, and, there was not very much else happening. I think they were pre-TV also, these films. They were in 68, etc. The 80s, the TV came in. So they kind of believed what they saw on screen also. So,
of course.
Yeah, I think that also helped towards this charismatic pairing, because there was a lot of pairs, but then suddenly
things opened up.
Things different.
We talked about Sharmila Ji and Rajesh Khanna. Of course, you've acted with Dharmendra and Amitabh Bachchan as well, and
Sanjeev Kumar
in Mausam, for which you got the National Award also. And I think you had a double role there as well.
That's right, yes.
From your perspective, how are these actors great? What made each of them so special?
We sort of act in films, we don't sit and analyze actors or performances as such, but they were all great fun to work with. Sanjeev, Shashi Kapoor, Dharmendra, they were really great pals, and, wonderful, giving, generous actors. I remember Dharmendra, I had to go and watch a cricket match in... I'd met Tiger then.
Yes.
So I had to go to Calcutta. There was a West Indies and India a test match at Eden Gardens. And I was shooting, double shift. I was shooting 7 to 2 with somebody else and 2 to 10. And the next morning I was leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And by about 6 o'clock, we knew that we couldn't finish it by 10 o'clock. And I requested Dharmendra, I said, will you please extend and finish because I have to go.
Right.
And he didn't have to do it. He said, okay, I will. I'll work overtime. And we finished at 5 in the morning.
Oh my God.
We carried on and on and on and finished. And I went straight to the airport. It was about 7 o'clock flight or something. And went back. So, that kind of generosity.
Right.
And
that camaraderie was there back then.
There was so much there. And Shashi also. And sometimes, they would say Sanjeev Kumar and Sanjeev, of course, we called him Hari Bhai.
Hari Bhai, yes.
And Shashi, they would really look at their watch and say, why do you argue so much? Because I would tell the director, but I'm not convinced. Why am I doing this and why? And they would really get fed up. And they said, please just do it for God's sake. If you're not, then just fake it. You don't have to be convinced. This is acting. And just listen to the director. And we all want to go home. We don't want to be here because you're, you want to be convinced.
Yeah.
So they were, really great fun to work with.
So one last question before we jump on to a different topic. One last question on films. You played roles from Champa to Pushpa, from Kashmir Ki Kali to Amar Prem. Is there a favorite role that you really enjoyed playing that role?
Personally, if you really ask me which role, I would say Safar.
Okay.
Because, now they are making the films that I would have liked to have worked in, if you understand what I'm saying. Because personally, I was one kind of person. And in the film, I was doing something that was always like all these boys used to tease me and say, you're arguing too much. But, all those tears and, looking helpless. And I said, but why should she be like this? And why this? So now that the women's characters are changing, they're much more independent, less tearful, less helpless. But it wasn't like that in our time. But in Safar, the tagline of the film was a woman who doesn't look back. And she is in love. Well, there are two men in her lives.
Right.
And both the men are in love with her. She also is fond of them. And then she marries one man. And then he's very suspicious and he dies. And she is blamed. She becomes, people think that she's killed him. But she doesn't buy into it. She doesn't play the victim.
Right.
And she goes on with her life. And that's what I liked about it, because it was a very forward-looking, even for today's time, she doesn't live for the family, so to speak. She lives for herself.
She had a mind of her own.
And that individual thing, which even now is lacking in films.
Right.
So that is why, the role was very good. And then, of course, Devi, one of Ray's films, which was my second film, really. And that also is a wonderfully relevant subject. How a woman is, puts her family before herself and has no idea about her own identity. And in the name of honor, tradition, how she is exploited and, suffers injustice. So I think that also very relevant in today's time. Even today, the same, in many pockets of India, as India lives in many centuries.
Of course.
So, so I think these two are my favorite.
Okay. Yeah. Talking about roles, so I know, we play lots of real world roles as well. I mean, you've obviously played the role of an actor, and then a mother, and I would say, you're probably the first lady of Indian cricket for a while as well, and of course, Begum of Pataudi, so all these roles. How would you contrast the real life roles versus film roles? Which one is harder for you?
Again, you just live that. I mean, that's just one me, really. Right. And there are
but
different
you have to
aspects.
Balance between all the aspects.
Yes. Of one's life. And there are only 24 hours. And those days we didn't even have a cell phone or anything.
Of course.
it just, if you want something and it happens. And I was always curious and I didn't really want to be one thing. I was not that career-minded.
I see.
And I was always ready to taste, different experiences. And even now, I still feel I don't know so much. And so I'm game to experience new things. So I'm glad because I really have access to many societies.
Of course.
In India, as you say, I married into a feudal family.
Right.
So their traditions and the way, their etiquettes was very enriching.
Of course.
And then in films, which is, in Hindi films particularly, is so, it reaches all India, not only all India, wherever the diaspora is.
Absolutely.
And it's so many people from all over India with their dreams come to Bombay.
Right.
And they invest in this profession, and it, with different surnames, different religions. So it's a world. It's really wonderful. So that was a great experience. And then, whatever else with UNICEF and with working in CBFC, censoring or whatever you call it. It's actually called Central Board of Film Certification, but the censor board.
Yeah, that's it's a name.
It's still called the censor board, but it's not. It's
and you were the chairperson
CBFC.
for that.
So that was another experience working with the government. So each, and like you say, the exposure to cricket in India, everybody is film mad and cricket mad.
Absolutely,
because both the C's are very popular.
The biggest passions for us Indians.
Passion, absolutely. And
did you love the cricketer or the cricket as well?
Both. I think we were all at that young age were very cricketer mad. But yes, and Tagore used to say that there are many. There are hundreds of actors, but there's only one cricket captain.
Very few cricketers, yes.
One cricket captain.
That's true.
So that was very true. So when cricket is in season, then everybody else
takes a back seat.
Now, of course, there's so much cricket. Earlier, there wasn't. So cricket was a very big thing. And before social media, and, these were real heroes.
Let's talk a little bit about your kids. Saif has done really well, and I know Soha is doing well. Did you coach them? Did you help them with films? Did you try to persuade them to get into or not?
When I was working, I kept my personal life and work quite separate.
I see.
And after pack up, there was no interaction with film. Because, as I said, it was division of 24 hours. So I didn't go to premieres. I didn't do, a lot of interviews.
Right.
Because there really wasn't enough time. So the kids were not really exposed to films at all. But incredibly, both, of course, I've got 3 children.
Right.
One, but Sabha is also doing jewelry design.
Right.
They all went into the creative field. And of their own. We just educated them because gave them that option. And they chose the path. Yes. And they've done well. And I'm really very happy. I mean, we are a working, actor family. So I think the process, the working as an actor is what really is nice, because it's a wonderful profession to be in. And success, of course, everybody wants. But the idea is to keep on working, remain an actor. I think that is what I, appreciate more than anything else.
And I know you've been involved with the film, although you're not actively acting right now, but you do see through your children on what's happening in cinema these days. So, and obviously grown up with the times that you did. How do you compare and contrast cinema from back in your days to what your kids are doing today?
Times were different. So what we did then was the demand. And now, of course, the audience has changed, and they have, appetite for a different genre of films. And so there's a lot of churning, and technically, the content wise, technology, everything has evolved, and it's so we are making good, and there's a lot of young directors, and they're making these short films and lots of wonderful things. I'm very, very optimistic about the future. There are very clever people out there, but also the single screen kind of film, Salman Khan, and those films are also very much so different kind of films are being made, and the technology is allowing them to be released. These so-called films, I mean the films without any stars, or so low budget films, so to speak, but they're also getting released, and they also have a certain kind of market. If the economy is right, if you don't overspend on and then the films are making money. So in our time, the finance wasn't in place. So a film used to take 3 to 4 years to be made. So now everything is there.
Is in place.
And people come on time. The film is finished on time. So all those, people are more professional. In our time, there was no script. The dialogues were being written on this. I mean, barring B.R. Chopra and few others, the dialogues were written on the set. So all that is not happening now, because it's a huge investment, and people are very good about it now. They are more professional.
So, who were your favorite heroes and heroines from your time? If you were not Sharmila Tagore, if you were just a film goer, who were your favorites back then?
Well, I always liked Shashi Kapoor because I thought he was very good looking, and Dilip Kumar, of course, as an actor, and Sanjeev Kumar. But everybody had their own thing. But Balraj Sahani. So these were my favorite, and actresses, Wahida Rahman continues to be my favorite, and then Nutan, Meena Kumari. But Wahida Ji was very special.
Graceful as ever, and I have to say the same about you. Having met you in person, you just look wonderful, and you look so graceful, and reminds me of your Amar Prem and Kashmir Ki Kali back. I keep going back to that film. Well, Sharmila Ji, thank you so much for being on the show today. I wish you all the very best for all the CRY events that you're going to be.
Thank you. Now we are going to New York.
Right.
And we are doing the same thing as we did here, but it will be slightly bigger.
Right.
And let's keep our fingers crossed, because the idea is to talk to them and make them believe in our vision.
Yes.
And get them to support CRY and become strong supporters of children and causes that that helps children.